Okay, welcome to this little mini lecture on shot composition. Means, think of that word composition, it means to compose, which is like to create something. So this is a little mini lecture on when you're composing shots. You're taking shots with either a video camera or a regular camera, cell phone, whatever it is that you're using, how to make your shots look nice, how to make them look professional. And also, some of you who are doing Flash might be watching this as well, because this also applies to animation. When you're drawing scenes, when you're animating things, you're also imagining that these scenes are somehow real. You're drawing them, and so some of these rules apply to animation as well as like taking real photographs. So I want to talk about three main ideas: rule of thirds, headroom, and talking and walking space. And they really all relate to rule of thirds. Rule of thirds is kind of like at the heart of the whole thing, and you'll see how they just basically connect to that idea. So let's start with rule of thirds. So what you want to do is when you're taking pictures, you want to imagine there's like a grid in your viewfinder, your camera, your cell phone, or once again if you're animating, the screen. And you want to imagine this grid has like a tic-tac-toe board. And what the rule of thirds tells us is that humans have just kind of, we've evolved, that our interest is kind of naturally drawn to these points where the grid crosses. So if you're looking at a picture or if you're looking at a scene out your window, you tend to look at one of these spots first and you kind of see what's there. It's kind of where you're naturally drawn to. So you want to use that when you make your pictures or take pictures. So rule of thirds, divide your screen into a tic-tac-toe grid, and you want to do is try to frame the important elements along these lines, especially where they intersect. So whatever it is that you want to draw the attention of the viewer to, that's where you put in these areas. If you want to, like, if you've got, say you're taking a picture of someone who's got beautiful eyes, you would want to put their eyes somewhere right around here or here. All right, this is going to create a visually stimulating picture. It's going to make it more interesting, and it typically gives you more of a sense of dynamism or like movement. So your picture doesn't just like look like it's flat and just sitting there. It looks more like, hey, there's something's happening. And we'll look at some examples. So frames that rely too heavily on just everything being centered all the time, things they kind of get boring and static. And that word static means it's not moving; it's just staying still. So let's look at a few examples, see what you think. So here's an interesting example. We took a picture of a bee and just left all this space here on the left completely blank. And they put the eye of the bee right there at that point, notice. And then you've got this interesting kind of flower on here. So that just kind of gives you more of a sense of like, there's a little space here because that bee probably could jump off and start to fly. It's going to go back into that space. So it just kind of gives you a little more sense of movement, and we're drawn right to that bee's eyes, and we see the wings. So that's one example. Eyes are typically one of the most interesting features to look at. So we try to get those eyes right on the third line. Here's another good example of some kind of bird. I think it's like a peacock. And they've put the eyes right up there on the third line. And here's a good example that kind of shows that whole idea that when you use rule of thirds, you kind of get a sense of movement. So the picture on the left here was completely centered, right down. And, it's fine. It's not that bad. But on the right, can suggest a little bit more like a sense of like the things are moving. So you have one of the subjects at this line, the third, then you have another one over here, and you kind of have a better sense of it moving. Let's try to see if we can see another one. Okay, this is another example of when things are really centered. They can sometimes just get lost. See, they centered the hill, the top of the hill, right down the middle, and then they put the man and the dog right in the middle. And of course, it's kind of far back, so that's another kind of part of this picture. It kind of gets lost there in the middle. Everything right there in the middle. Versus the picture on the left. Now they did zoom up a little bit, but by bringing the foreground here, the hill, bringing it down to the 1/3 and leaving more space up on top, it's kind of more interesting. And we've got the man over on the left, so that gives you just a little more visually stimulating picture. Here's another example from a video some students did years ago. So we have this. It's not perfectly 1/3, but you basically got the hand kind of in the foreground, and then you got the eyes and that rule 1/3 in the background. Here's another really good example. Remember your horizon. The horizon is where the earth meets the sky. And You want to avoid, typically you want to avoid bringing the horizon right down the middle. So either put it way down here in the 1/3, or sometimes you can put the horizon way up on the top in the 1/3. More typically down here. And then it's just, once again, typically you might say it's a little more interesting. And remember, when we say things like, when we're in art, when we're talking about rules of thirds, it's we don't want to like get too focused. It's not like a rule like in math class where it's always true. Excuse me, I got a peanut in my throat. Sorry about that. So in art, the rule it's like a guideline, all right? And of course you can break the rule, but typically what you want to do is learn the rule, understand the rule first, use the rule, and then maybe you start to break the rule. If you just break the rule without really learning it, then you typically, that's like just amateur, and you can kind of tell. You might not believe that, but you typically kind of can tell that. Here's another one showing how they've gotten this big old castle, probably in France, and they've left this space over here on the left. Just kind of left it there. Instead of putting this right in the middle, smack dab, they've kind of put it over to the right 2/3 and left an open space on a third. Makes it interesting. Now, that same rule of thirds, you apply that to your headroom. So when you're taking pictures, remember you don't want to have a bunch of space over the over their head. You know, and a lot of amateurs, people, when I say amateurs, really that just simply means people, you're not really thinking about everything. You're typically more just thinking about, I want to take a picture of this, and you're not thinking about how the picture is going to look. That's kind of what separates an amateur for someone who's just being a little more aware. So here's a picture of my son David from many years ago playing tennis, and had left a little bit of headroom there. Now here's another picture of him close up, and notice how there's very little headroom, and his eyes are basically right there. And typically the eyes, if you bring the eyes up to the 2/3 line, it will take care of the headroom for you. You won't have too much space. And I've also kind of gotten him over on the left side of the screen and left a little opening over there on the right. Now that the idea about headroom also applies, or the rule of 1/3 also applies to talking or walking space. And that is, let me just show you a picture. When someone's walking into your picture, you want to leave them extra space in front of where they're walking towards to suggest that they're going to move in this direction. So we put Al from a long time ago on the left side of the screen, and he's moving this side. This was actually a screen grab from one of the videos the kid shot. Here's a great example. On the one on the right, they violated the rule of thirds, and she's just about to run right off the picture, and it's got all this empty space. It's kind of weird. It's like, why are you looking at this? Is a dog about to run in here? This side's a little bit better done. Just got a little more space. This next shot's classic. All right, action shot. Put the boat on the right side 1/3. Leave lots of room because the boat's going to be moving in this direction. So remember this when you're doing your shot composition. Remember, these are just a general guideline. In the senior seminar class and in my video class, you guys are going to go out and take a bunch of pictures of different examples. So the specific examples, you're going to do like a picture of a close-up. You're going to want to have certain things for that close-up, but you want to remember the rule of thirds. No matter what kind of picture you're taking, close-ups, extreme close-ups, long shots, the rule of thirds is always kind of there in the background, kind of helping you frame your shots and making them look a little more interesting. I really encourage you guys if you do a lot of pictures, if you just post stuff on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, start to think about these rules and make your shots a little more interesting by not always putting everything right in the middle. So hopefully you enjoyed this. There's a few references and then a nice little example if you want to watch.